Okay, I think we're live.
Excuse me, please.
Okay, here we go. Good morning, everyone. This is the Senate Transportation Committee. It's Thursday, March 2nd, and we're going to continue our discussion on mileage-based user fee program proposal, S64. And we have on screen this morning Senator Perchlik and Senator Kitchell, and three of us are here. To start off, I think our first guest this morning is Matt Cota, Director of Government Affairs, Vermont Association of Vehicle and Automotive Dealers. So, good morning, Matt, and welcome.
Good morning, Matt Cota, for the record, with a company called Meadow Hill. Represents a variety of clients in the energy and transportation world. And this discussion that you're having about EVs uniquely coincides with two of my clients, which includes the Vermont Vehicle and Auto Distributors Association, who are selling EVs and will sell many more EVs, and the Vermont Petroleum Association, which is a division of the Vermont Retail and Grocers Association, which represents the convenience stores that are selling the gasoline and installing electric car chargers so they can sell electricity and other stuff to their customers. So I just want to give a perspective from both sides. We're not here to say that we absolutely need to do this or don't do this. We just want to give you a perspective of how all of these changes impact the businesses. So on gallons of gasoline sold, you'll notice from the chart, the biggest thing that strikes you is the gray line. What happened then in the months of April and May? Well, that's COVID. That's when and all these numbers come from the Department of Motor Vehicles. So our gallons of gasoline dropped precipitously in April and May, only to rebound. But you're seeing a steady trend downward on gasoline gallons sold, about 2% every year, except for that anomaly, which is 2020 because of COVID. And we suspect that will continue to trend at least 2%, but probably much more. So the conversation that you're having about how to replace the lost income from the gasoline tax is an appropriate one. How you get it is a difficult conversation, and there's a lot of known unknowns there. The second page just shows you where we are on diesel. Again, a smaller drop during COVID in April and May, during the height of COVID when most of the economy shut down. But our diesel sales are pretty flat, and you can see that from the third page.
Matt?
Yeah.
Or Chair, I don't see the third page, nor the first, nor the second. So is your presentation up on the website?
I just sent the PDF to Mike.
Mike, can you post that so Jane and Senator Kitchell and Senator?
Sorry about that.
Sorry, guys.
Take a second here.
It's my fault, Senator Perchlik. It's not Mike's
Okay.
fault. Covering for.
I just assumed I didn't know where it was, but okay. I'm sure they're fabulous grass. I want to make sure.
Well, Matt Cota is not busy these days, so
Great, yeah, that worked.
The general theme is you've seen the numbers presented in a different way by AOT, gasoline gallons going down. But here's the fundamental question that we have as an industry, whether you're selling gasoline or you're selling electrons for vehicles, or whether you're selling vehicles themselves, is what's the most appropriate way to recapture the funds lost from the gas tax. And there's not an opposition to registration fees or some sort of kilowatt hour charge in order to recoup that, because we understand the fundamental problem in capturing that transportation funds. For the convenience store operators, their important thing that they want to convey is that they want to be able to install these DC fast chargers and to have a way that they can, as Senator Ingalls pointed out yesterday, post the price in a clear and transparent way, just like they do for gasoline, and be able to pay the tax as they do for gasoline. How do we develop that? I don't have the answers. And I think that's part of the study that the AOT is doing to determine how that actually will work.
yeah, that's been the question around is how we get there. So it's a very tough subject naturally, and we're trying to do the best we can to hear from everybody and get some input, because it's not an easy solution. And I think that good discussion will bring forward, because we do have a giant we have to refill from gasoline tax, I think it's around 78 million, like that, so it's a big nut to crack, we gotta do it fairly, and we gotta do it that, everybody pays equivalent to what they're paying in gasoline tax, and, that's all we're asking, how to do it, how to collect it. It's very, it's an important issue, that's all I can say, that's what we wanna hear from everybody, try to get the best solutions out there, or at least ideas, because I'm sure other people are going through this. It's not going to affect us tomorrow morning, but it is going to affect us as the years go on. And we're incentivizing cars and doing more all the time. That's not a bad thing, but on the other hand, not everyone replace the gas tax. So go right ahead. Go ahead. You got it.
And from the perspective of the,
Are we going to have these charts up there? Is that the plan?
Okay. You see the charts, Senator Pertlick, Senator Kitchell?
I'm-
Of Matt's
I'm
presentation?
I'm working on bringing it up.
Okay.
Yeah.
You want to share it into the screen?
I have them up now.
You're all right?
Yeah, they're now on the.
Okay.
so the information, of course, is all from the Department of Motor Vehicles, which publishes monthly our sales of gasoline and diesel fuel. So it's important to note that as you look at either a registration fee for battery electric vehicles, of course, that captures anyone with a green plate, a Vermont plate, but doesn't capture the out-of-state vehicles that come in. So I don't know how you combine both a per kilowatt hour charge plus a registration fee,
Well,
but
the only other problem with that is if some person drives 50 miles a year, and how can you charge them the same as someone's driving, 10,000 miles a year or 30,000 miles a year? So that's the registration is, I looked into it the best I could, but it doesn't make a lot of sense because we like to pay on the usage of the highway,
Right.
and it doesn't reflect on the registration fee, but
in the comment that was often cited by Senator Kitchell, which is you buy your gasoline in one place, but you're driving miles in other roads. That would hold true for electric chargers as well. We do have a system though that works for diesel fuel. It's the International Fuel Tax Agreement.
That's, you
But
report any
that's-
state you're driving in, then
Right.
you don't want to get into that.
Yeah, that would be
No,
challenging
you
to
don't know
apply
that.
on the electric vehicle and gasoline
That's a
vehicle.
little difference from future thousand truck versus, hundreds of thousands of
Right.
automobiles.
So can we do it? Do we do it? Yes, for diesel. Could we do that for gasoline powered vehicles and for battery electric vehicles?
I don't see
Challenge.
that. Yes.
And I think really, I think it's almost been determined that the way we're gonna capture out-of-state plates are on the public charging stations. We've yet to set that in place, but I think that's probably the only discussion that could be had about how would you get those people. But I think the big one's gonna be how do we get the in-state people who are either charging at home or really just charging at home. The convenience store people, as you said, wanna price posted and they prefer to do it just like they do with the gas tax. Collect the monies for the charging that's happened and send a fee in. And I think the difference is gonna be is how do we do Vermonters who are charging at home? And how do we make that difference?
So from the convenience store side, there's an organization called the National Association of Convenience Stores. I'm happy to share their research, but it's their determination that, or their prediction, I should say, because no one quite knows how this is all going to play out over the next 10 years as more and more vehicles are charged by or powered by electricity, which is that about 60% of the charging will occur at home. So in terms of the amount of time or the amount of sales that a convenience store operators want to be in the business of supplying energy for vehicles. They have the best locations everywhere. That's why they're there, because it's where the most density is in terms of traffic. And if people are driving electric vehicles, they want to be able to sell electricity. Full stop. But the reality is that more than half of that electricity for cars will come charged at night in people's.
When you talk about the convenience stores, what's their thought about? They get a percentage of the electricity sales or something, because right now they're selling gasoline and making a profit. What would their answer be to, they get how much electricity goes out at their charging station in their yard?
So there's there's all sorts of different business models, such as there's different business models for selling gasoline. If you go to some stores that the store itself, the owner of the store owns the pumps and the tanks. In other situations, the owner of the store owns the store and a different company owns the pumps and the tanks. Same thing's happening with the different charging vendors, EVgo, ChargePoint, in which they can have a different business relationship with that vendor. You can just buy the equipment, as some have, like Tom Frawley at Summit, just bought the equipment and it's all his.
But
Or
they're making a profit on the gallon of gasoline. Right?
yes,
Okay.
yeah, in terms of what is selling electricity profitable at the moment?
No.
No.
But I'm saying, so they would get a piece of the sales of electricity, what you're thinking.
That is the hope. that-
Okay, no, I'm just trying to
Yeah.
figure out, because I know, because right now, their profit is, big profit is made at the pumps. Then they get people go to the store and buy, I don't buy gas pump, but they go and buy other things.
That's right.
But if you replace the gas pumps, you're not gonna survive just on coffee sales. You're gonna have to get some piece of the action of electricity, I think.
Yes, and we don't think we'll be replacing the gas pumps, quite frankly, for many years, because
Oh, no.
gasoline powered cars will still
Sure, I
be
know that.
in rotation. So it's more of additive than we're not removing gas pumps and putting in EV chargers. We are finding enough real estate to add EV chargers. And you think about it, if you're doing 4, if you don't want to do 1, you want to do 4, so something, one's empty, just like you don't want one gas pump. You've got to be able to have the real estate for 4 cars,
And longer stays,
longer stays.
because the gas pumps you're in and out of there in 10
It has
minutes.
to be a certain distance from where the tractor trailers come,
Yeah,
drop the
yeah,
gasoline. So those that are in really tight spaces, like right across the street
Right.
there, they're not ever gonna have an EV
No,
charge.
no.
But, up in Maple Woods over
Right.
Wayne's place up in Berlin, perfect spot for it.
Is there, I think I know the answer to this, because we've talked yesterday about it. Is there any convenience store now selling electricity to the public and making a profit on it?
I don't know about profit. I do know that they are, have arrangements with different charging companies in order to, in how that financial arrangement works between the ChargePoint or EVgo or any of the vendors and whether they're buying, a charging company can pay rent to a vendor, whether you sell gasoline or not, in order to be able to people put in their credit card and purchase electrons. Or it can be the company can do it. In terms of whether or not the capital infrastructure at this point is turning a profit, I don't.
How is
I don't have
Tesla
that
doing?
information.
Tesla's got them all over the state. Are they paying someone, are they buying their own land to put their charging station? Or are they,
I don't know the answer to that.
because I understand there's Tesla charging stations, right? All over the state.
South
So
Burlington,
they-
Brattleboro.
Are they tied in with a business or anybody know on the screen? Anybody?
I know that Tesla has put in a bank of chargers in the Green Mountain Mall and St. Johnsbury Center. I would assume that it's a rental arrangement. There are charging, there's a charging station in Hannaford's in Bradford. There are level 2 and a fast charge at Marty's. So I imagine they all have different arrangements in terms of is it rental fee? But I just noticed Tesla's installed a bank in a shopping mall. I think it follows different business models. The main thing is you've got to have the phase 3 power for, and you've got to have obviously enough parking capacity. And generally, obviously at a store, then the advantage is people are, while they're charging, going in and they actually are shopping, purchasing, perhaps having a meal or a lunch. But I think that probably the model varies depending on the site.
Okay, thank you.
So in summary, as you can see on page 3, gasoline gallons, which is the bulk of our, it's going down 2 to 3%. And over the next 5 years, you can see that 5 to 6%. We're still going to sell 250 million gallons of gasoline 5 years from now in Vermont. but that will trend down. So the action you're taking now to determine how to recapture transportation funds through some mechanism, I think is appropriate from the convenience store side and from the auto dealer side. We're not supportive or not supportive of any policy, but we are supportive of the effort to determine how to best to do it. So I can't tell you that there's been no vote of either body to a government affairs board to say this is the way we should do it, this is the way we shouldn't do it. We don't know. We just know we all have a problem in terms of funding transportation.
That's good.
So, and maybe you don't know this, Matt, because this might be outside of who you're representing. A charge point, or these charging stations that are popping up, they're not doing it as a public service. They've got to be making money somehow. Is that fair?
Yes.
And the only way that I see it doing, they're buying electricity for this much and selling it for this much. Is that how you would see that?
I don't know the specific arrangement that ChargePoint has with, I'm sure Green Mountain Power would have much better information on how the money flows there. I just know the arrangement is not between the power company and the convenience store.
Right.
It's with usually the convenience store or the grocery store and the charging company, or in the case of Tesla, the actual manufacturer of the vehicles.
Yes,
I just want to catch one thing you said that's really important. And as I keep thinking about this, and it was a lower number than I expected, but you said the convenience store estimates 60% of the charging will occur at home. So it's not only that we're just seeing less gas purchased, but with that 60% void, that unless we charge there, we have a really permanent big hole we have to fill.
we've got to figure out a way to charge at home. Well, it's not going to work it's like gasoline, you have to go to the pumps, but this is a whole new ballgame. And, but it is at least you pay for your mileage, if you can figure out a way to do that. You pay that. That's what we got to do, is figure out the mileage.
I think we heard right now that we're losing about $1 million a year, right? As of right now, not what everybody remembers.
Just a little shy, I think.
Yeah.
We're ramping up, so I expect that to get.
Yeah, this is it's certainly going to increase over the years. That's the only fair way I see is miles driven, and they should pay for like we do gasoline. So how we do that, that's going to be the question. If it was just 100% on the road, that would be easy. But we've got to figure out the home plug-ins and how we handle that. 'Cause everything I've read and what you said this morning, it's home, and that's what they're going to plug in. Yes, go ahead.
But if you're doing a vehicle miles traveled, then you don't need to worry about the whether it's charged at home or I don't know, free at work. You're paying based on actual highway usage. And it's true, we do have a mechanism for interstate travel. I mean, buses, tractor trailer trucks, the minute they cross a state line, they have to record all that mileage, and then there's that whole mechanism to apportion. So if we go to vehicle miles traveled, it's, the issue then becomes one of, if you wait and only do it on an annual basis, as we said, it adds to a higher cost. I mean, all at one time. The question, as opposed to the gas tax, which you pay, just as you buy. And then the other would be some kind of more frequent billing, if in fact that is the option that we take. But if you base it on the odometer, then you don't need to worry about home charging, because you're picking up you're using a different methodology to generate the replacement revenue.
But how would you'd have to have 25, 30 people figure the billing system out, DMV, if they don't pay, if they pay monthly, if they pay quarterly, if they pay yearly. All I can imagine is they wait till the end of the year, then they owe $200 or $250 at inspection time. And so then they say, okay, if you don't pay, take your license away.
Well, what you could do is you could, and I think AOT has thought this through. You could obviously have them more frequent than once a year. You could do quarterly. I mean, there are other ways.
Would you bill them once a month? I mean, how would you do that?
Well, to me, that's a decision that's still out there to be made in terms of how you would, if you opted for that methodology, how you would support that billing cycle. I mean, utility companies bill once a month, but if you don't use actual kilowatt hours used for charging as your base and use vehicle miles traveled, then you have a different set of decisions and administrative issues that have to be addressed and accommodated.
If you're talking 600,000 people or whatever a year to keep track of how they pay, that would be a nightmare. And at the end of the year, if you don't want to pay, nobody's going to. Right now, you pay as you use, which is very easy. But my fear is if you get into the billing system or honor payment honor every month or 2 months, who's going to want to do that? And if you miss a payment or at the end of the year, you got all this money and it's going to be shocking.
Yeah, well, you could use a more simple, and that is you do a surcharge on the registration and you just set up a quarterly billing for whatever, the annual registration fee and surcharge. And you can, I mean, you have all kinds of billing systems that
But then
are in
according to
place.
usage, though, Jane.
What?
You're not paying according to usage. If
I
you
know, I'm just saying that is, you can go for administrative simplicity and, or you can try to be more precise in terms of which the vehicle miles travel methodology gets you, but it raises all the questions or issues that you've identified that would have to be addressed. And I think the big thing is waiting until, one payment at the end of the year could pose some significant hardships for certain households.
Right. I think
I mean-
ideally, I'm sorry, Jane, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so to me, that's all part of the analysis that the agency has got to undertake, and any proposal, how to mitigate that, that if larger once a year tab.
I think it would be nice just to figure out, so we just have one way to do it, which is the way you do it at the charging stations, and the way you do it at the charging stations is the way you do it at home. One system, because if we try to do a mileage-based system, you've got two different systems. You're doing it two different ways. And if we could make it efficient by doing it usage.
I agree. I just think it's going to be difficult, and that's why I'm really glad we're going to hear from these fine folk with a variety of perspectives on how to possibly do it at home consistently, logistically.
Yeah, to me, that's the challenge. How to do it so it could be incorporated as maybe part of the monthly bill. But what's the technology requirements that would come with that, I guess, is what we need to understand.
I think we get to hear that today.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, who wants to go next? Tell us about some of these issues. Yes. Anybody willing to throw her out?
I'm just here because I'm interested in the topic.
Okay. So who do we have? You want to?
Senator, Candace Morgan from Green Mountain Power is
Okay,
upstairs.
join us.
Well, I could see if she can come down. She was planning to
Okay.
chat with later. I think Justin Johnson from MMR
He
was.
was on the agenda.
You didn't have the authorization to testify for the meeting.
Okay.
So I've taken it off the list.
So you're on already. All
Who's
right.
that?
Justin Johnson did not have authorization to testify.
Let me, see if I can talk to her.
Okay. Yeah. Nobody wants to talk about this subject. They're all staying shy.
Yeah, continue.
Yeah, go ahead.
So to what you were saying, Senator Ingles, I completely agree, but I think to get to that point, it's going to take a huge amount of coordination across all the electricity providers or the cards themselves and then the internet service providers. And that's no small lift. And so that's where I come back to the previous, it's going to have to be a national.
We have 2 years to figure it out, right? Because that's where it's at. And as we are hearing all along, the technology changes leaps and bounds. And but if we give them a target to shoot for, maybe we can get there. just like to be, I'd like to do it modern, simple, easy, and I'd like not to wait, as Jane said, there could be some hardships at the end of the year. And the other hardships could also be that we're going to ask these poor people who are just not poor in wealth, but these people who are inspecting cars, we're gonna ask them to become tax collectors and to hear all of that. And I just want to avoid that. I don't think we should put it on them to do that.
And if it's somehow on the monthly electricity bill, that can be income sensitized through a variety of existing methods. So it's better to get.
And it isn't like they're already not collecting different. I look at my electric bill, there's 7 different charges on there. So it isn't like it's a new concept that they can collect monies and send it elsewhere, because they do. They do it for Efficiency Vermont. They do it for all kinds of other different things. We just, again, get down to what is the technology that is going to allow us to do that?
Green Mountain Power, would you like to testify?
So Candace is here, but she's on a call until 10 o'clock
Okay.
when she's scheduled.
Do
So
you have anything to say?
I'm going to let her speak this morning.
All right, so we don't have anybody till 10 o'clock, is that what I'm hearing?
Where's Bridget Morris?
I think she sent a letter.
She sent a The letter's on.
So the written testimony that we can review. Anytime. Yep.
What happened to Justin Johnson? He's been in and out for a week. Is he serious or he wants to?
He did not get the authorization to testify for GM, which is who we
Heard
heard
that last week, though, so sooner or later, they gotta step up to the plate.
Do you want to try to go with this letter that we've got from written testimony from Alliance for Automotive Innovation?
I gave you a copy.
It's this one right here, so, or maybe.
I got
you find it for you.
Hold on. No, I got it.
Just shows how difficult a topic this is
It
too.
is, it's not easy, we're not gonna resolve it today, but discussion going.
Here's always I think it's easy for us to say this, but I think it's very valid. I don't want to do something that New Hampshire's not going to do and New York's not going to do. So I want to see some coordination across our region.
I think that Senator Mazza raised a good point offline yesterday, and that is that it doesn't seem, and Senator Perchlik, maybe you know, because you're the resident expert as far as having an EV, or Senator Kitchell, but I don't think it's been determined anywhere in the United States on how they're gonna do this. I would find it hard to believe that there's already states out there that aren't collecting to make up for the difference.
I think they are. I think some are
Sure.
doing less perfect and doing like a surcharge, for example.
Okay.
So many,
I think we
many
got some
states have,
testimony on that.
yeah, many states have just a higher registration fee. That's how most states have done it. There are a couple states that have done mileage fees. I think both Oregon and New Mexico. I think they might be calling them pilots. I don't know if they've continued those pilots, but they were like the Oregon, I think, was said you can pay the extra $100 a year fee, or you could, if you think you drive less miles, then do the odometer reading, or you could even get a GPS installed in your car if you think that you're going to be driving more miles outside of Oregon and don't want to pay the tax to Oregon. So there are states that are trying to do some pilots on the actual miles traveled fees. I don't know if any states, at least back in 2019 when we were looking at this, I don't remember any states charging on the kilowatt hour, by the kilowatt hour.
And
Yes. You know,
Yeah, Dylan Zwicky for Leonine Public Affairs. I think AOT did provide a map of what other states are doing. My recollection is that there's only one other state that has passed a mileage-based has passed a per kilowatt hour charge. That's Oklahoma, and it has not gone into effect yet.
And to Senator Kitchell's point that she had mentioned at one time, and Senator Perchlik's point, these out-of-state drivers, we are going to lose money if we don't do it in a kilowatt collected at the kilowatt way, because yes, you do have some people coming through the state, filling up before they head out of state. And so those folks, you're gonna lose even more money. I don't know what percentages of revenue that you're gonna lose, but you are gonna lose some people that don't drive all the miles in Vermont. They gas up here and hit the New Hampshire border and away that they go.
Or they stay here for a week or two.
Right.
We do have, Covet and others provide data on how much of the highway revenues today from gas sales come from out-of-state visitors because they have the credit card data. So most people pay with credit cards, and you can tell where that credit card is out of state or not. If, for some reason, I want to say it was like 20%. It was like a decent amount.
Yeah, but you said it's 20% that you're not gonna collect anymore. Again, and that's somewhere along the way, that's why definitely it's revenue lost.
Well, that's why, one thing that you could do a hybrid so that you're doing like a tax on the kilowatt hour on level 3 chargers, which, you know, the people traveling through would be using more than resident Vermonters, because they don't recommend you routinely charge with a level 3 because of the battery. So there are ways that you can begin to capture at least some of that travel. I guess where it would require more technology is like if resorts are providing a level 2 charger to their guests, and they aren't charging at, say, one of the public level 3, but we could at least put a tax on the electricity sold on those charging stations.
Yes.
That
Yeah.
would have to go through the power company, correct?
Or whoever's managing that charging station.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know why it's difficult. I gotta hear more about why it's difficult for the power companies. When that comes in once a month, you figure how much they collected. They keep a percentage for their labor, and they send the rest of the state like we do gas tax.
Well, I would think with a level 3, the utility might not own the charging station. So the vendor, just like any other vendor, would have to collect the tax and remit it to the state.
Right. So it's either gonna be the power company or the vendor at that point in time. And then what Senator Maza might have been referring to is that the in-home charging, can we figure out a way that can happen the same way?
That's the big deal.
I think we could easily pass a law that require all publicly accessible chargers, be it type 2 or type 3, level 2, level 3, that they have to collect a tax, and that would be at the ski resorts. The big question for me is that 60% hole Mr. Coda just spoke about for the charging at home. And that's
Right, exactly. I think that's really what we're gonna have to figure out. I think the other is very easily to figure out. You have a charge point. Whoever is in charge of that is going to collect a fee and send it forward.
There'll be some leakage. I mean, can't stop extension cords from charging these cars, but if any commercial enterprise is going to abide by the laws that pass, they will be mandated to collect a fee for all publicly accessible charges.
We've got it the easy way. Gasoline is easy because you have to burn gasoline. You go up to anywhere you get it, you pay the tax. It's pretty simple.
What do they do with horse and buggies? Have they tax horse and buggies?
Tax the green, the RC.
Question, curious.
Well, why don't we gotta wait till 10 o'clock, I guess, for our next.
Okay.
There's people that are on already from the 10 o'clock section. If you want to go up there with that.
We have anybody here for Mike?
Julie Leopold is on.
Okay, can we do that?
Yeah.
Let's continue going, sure.
She's in the waiting room.
She's in.
Now,
Okay.
I don't
There
have,
she is.
I don't have it. Good morning. Oh,
Hello, good morning. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
yes, thank you. Julia Leopold, is that Public Affairs? Why don't you explain or tell the committee all about yourself, okay? Go right ahead.
Sure. Yep. Yep. And like you mentioned, for the record, Julia Leopold, VEPSA Director of Public Affairs. Appreciate the opportunity to Zoom in today and be remote as we all protect our health. So I have a slide deck that I can pull up. If I can go ahead and start the screen share. Oh, it looks like the Screen sharing option has been disabled. Is it possible to
Take care of
enable?
that right now.
I got things. Yeah, I got it.
Sure, just let me know when.
Good to go.
Great. All right, and can everyone see that okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Great. Okay, well, we'll get started. So just a few things that I'll kind of walk through in this slide deck today. I'll do a brief about VEPSA, who we are, who we serve, talk about the EVs in our communities, and then give some of our considerations as you all determine how best to collect a fee to replace the gas tax. So a little bit about VEPSA that I think is important to know, and I'm not going to get too in detail here, but you are welcome to revisit this at any point. I did send this over to the committee assistant, so I believe it should be on the website. But that first column is the one that I really want to focus on. Basically, in Vermont, there are 3 different types of electric utilities. Vermont Public Power Supply Authority is technically itself not an electric utility, but we're an organization that serves public power utilities. So the utilities that we serve are not for profit. They're owned by their community. They're governed by locally elected boards, and they're regulated by the Vermont Public Utility Commission, just like all of the other electric utilities in the state. Something that I always find interesting is that when you look at the whole list of the electric utilities in Vermont, of which there are 17, we have the most public power utility types in the state. So 14 of the 17 electric utilities in the state are municipal electric utilities. Of those 14, 11 are members of Vermont Public Power Supply Authority. And that map on the left gives you a pretty good idea of all the different utility territories. I've included the link at the bottom. So if you're ever questioning, what town is served by what utility, sometimes the town is served by one, sometimes it's served by 3 or 4 different utilities. So this is a really helpful map. And at that link, you can kind of go in and zoom in to see who's served by which utility. That's a really great resource. 1 in 7 Vermonters are served by public power. So the idea here is that even though the majority of utility types in the state of Vermont, it's very much a minority in terms of the customers that are actually served by those types of utilities. So that really leads to why VEPSA was created. Back in the late 1970s, this group of smaller municipal electric utilities came together and realized that they wanted to continue to provide high-end service to their customers, but they needed to have some back-end services that were consolidated, and that would allow them to take advantage of economies of scale. So VEPSA was formed to help provide those back-end services so the utilities could continue to provide their high-end services to their customers. So we call that beneficial consolidation. Basically, our member utilities decide what services they would prefer to have consolidated. VEPSA can take over those, and each utility can maintain its autonomy in terms of the decision-making process and their power supply portfolio, among several of their services that they offer to their customers. So this is just kind of a laundry list of some of the services that we provide. I've mentioned power supply several times at this point. Again, that's really our bread and butter and the reason why we were founded. But since the late 70s, those services have grown quite a bit. We are an organization that also provides rate services to our utility members. So when a utility is going in for an adjustment to a particular rate, they usually come to us to assist them with that. As for where we work, it's all across the state. We have 11 electric utilities in our membership, and each of those stars represents the central point of where each of those utilities are. The blue numbers on the right are the customer counts or approximate customer counts for each electric utility. And you can see it's fairly small. The largest one on there is Lyndonville Electric Department at around 5,700 meters. So while they're small individually, what's worth noting is that when you add them all up together, you get about 30,000 customers. So it is a significant portion. And the work that we do allows these smaller utilities to thrive. Something that I also like to point out This is a map that you might be familiar with. This is the 2019 Energy Burden Report that Efficiency Vermont released. I believe that they are working on updating this, and I've included the link at the bottom if you do want to ever, check this out on your own and get more granular detail. But this Energy Burden Report shows where our communities are spending a high portion of their household income on energy. And that's energy across all sectors: transportation, thermal, and electricity. So the towns that are shaded in orange have a higher energy burden, meaning they're spending more of their income on energy across those three sectors. So what I've done is overlaid where we serve and where we have this energy burden report. And you can see that a lot of those stars are in the orange colored communities, meaning that a lot of the communities that VEPSA serves experience that high energy burden. And that is likely, in most of these cases, not necessarily due to the high energy costs, but more due to the fact that their household incomes are lower.
We have a question. Go ahead.
Okay, maybe you're about to say this, but I also see that the areas with the lowest average are primarily served by Vermont Gas. This total energy burden is also factoring gas, or are we just talking about electricity with this?
So this is across all sectors. So it does include heating of our homes and buildings.
Okay.
And again, that link is there if you want to learn more about the energy burden report that Efficiency Vermont puts forward.
Would you agree with the point that it's both higher salaries and a lower cost of heating our homes in areas served by natural gas?
I think it just depends on the situation. Again, I can't speak too fluently to the details of the report, but I think at a high level, if someone has lower home heating costs, then they'd be spending less than if they had higher home heating costs.
Thank you.
So just to give a little bit of a recap of some of the work that VEPSA has done with the legislature in the past, something that was very meaningful to us last year was that in 2022, the legislature passed the budget bill, including $8 million for advanced meter infrastructure for municipal utilities and for cooperatives. So to give you an idea of our technology landscape and where we are right now, we do not currently have smart meters in place at any of the VEPSA member utilities. So we are sending meter readers out to go gather that information. However, with this funding, we were able to apply for a grant. So that $8 million went to the Vermont Department of Public Service. VEPSA then applied for the grant, and we received notice just a couple of weeks ago that we are going to be receiving $5 million to install AMI. And this is hugely helpful to our member utilities because it helps alleviate some of the cost burden. And once those meters are installed, which we're expecting to begin on a rolling basis in late 2023 or early 2024, those meters will supply the electric utility and the customer with more detailed data on their electric consumption. It is worth noting that AMI is a whole home way to gather electric consumption information. So it's not going to delineate between whether your washer or dryer is running, whether your refrigerator is running, and what the electric consumption is there. It's not going to be able to.
Julie, we have a couple of questions.
And I'm sorry if I'm cutting you off again, Julia. I just, on this point, I'm hoping that either you or maybe some of our next presenters from Green Mountain Power might be able to elaborate. I'm really interested to crystallize some of the conversation we keep circling here is what these smart meters can do, what they do, and what might we be able to mandate them to do in the future with regards to tracking what's charging in our residential houses in the great state of Vermont.
Senator Ingles, you had a question?
I wanted to congratulate you on the reward of the $5 million. And my question is exactly as Senator Chittenden has phrased it.
Sure. So I'll do my best to answer. So my understanding is that advanced metering infrastructure is really beneficial for gathering data on electric consumption on a pretty frequent basis, and that it has two-way communication between the meter and the utility. So something that I know our member utilities appreciate about AMI is that they won't necessarily need to get a phone call from the customer to know if power is out. They'll be able to learn that, not necessarily instantly, but I believe these meters will send data on 15-minute incremental basis. We'll also.
Are they adaptable? Are they programmable? Are they able to be adjusted? Are they able to be tuned in to recognize a difference in load? Can you do all of that?
So I don't necessarily know, but my understanding is that they can't get down to a granular level in terms of understanding where within the home the load consumption is coming from. In order to track any type of any load consumption from something specific inside of the home, you would either need separate metering or you would need additional hardware or software technology that could then communicate that information with the customer and the utility.
Or an app or something like that that could be programmed to recognize a different signature pattern. And the reason why I say that, Julia, is that I'm involved in real estate, and we have companies that offer us software. And a while ago, they were having problems with companies buying one subscription and then 4 or 5 people using that subscription. And what they were able to do is they were able to determine with an app who was using that computers by the way they used the keystrokes, how hard they actually pushed on the keys of that computer, which it sounds fairly high tech, and I guess it is fairly high tech, but it doesn't sound as high tech as what these meters are. These meters seem to be a lot more higher tech than keystrokes on a computer.
Sure, and I'd be happy to put you in touch with the folks in our organization who are working on procuring the meters. As I understand it, we're still finalizing our contract with the meter vendor. So I think if that's something that you're interested in learning about what these meters can and cannot do, I'd be happy to follow up with you on that.
Very interested.
Sure. So this is, again, our way of just saying thank you for this funding. AMI is a crucial technology to being able to provide more innovative services to our members' customers. And we're grateful for this funding that keeps it affordable for our member communities.
Thank you.
So now to just, sorry.
Go ahead. Yep, go ahead. Thank you.
So now to just switch gears to talk about electric vehicles in our communities. In the past few years, since our program began in 2019, VEPSA has spent over $725,000 on more than 1,500 incentives to help Vermonters reduce fossil fuel. And that includes incentives for over 150 EVs. And I've broken out the incentive amounts here. We provide a $1,000 incentive for a new all-electric vehicle. And there is an adder for income qualifying households. That means if their household is below 80% of the area median income on a statewide basis. So pretty robust incentives, and we have had some decent uptake, I think, of this program. But when you break it out by community, I thought this was really interesting. This is where our incentives have gone since our program started in 2019 and through the end of 2022. And you can see that we have several communities where the uptake of our EV incentives is fairly low. For example, Village of Jacksonville, only 1 incentive provided, Village of Johnson, only 2. What I think is worth noting here is that this data, again, is purely coming from where we have provided incentives. It is entirely possible that people purchased electric vehicles before 2019, so we're not capturing that here. It's also possible that utility customers maybe, bought an electric vehicle but didn't necessarily apply for the VEPSA incentive. So I would say that these are likely an underestimate of the number of electric vehicles in these communities, but not by much. Most people, when they learn of an incentive, they like to try to take advantage of it. And we have had increased uptake of our EV incentives, especially since we've seen the statewide incentive kick in.
30,000 members and only 150 cars. It does seem to be low.
Yes, yeah, around 30,000 customers total, around 150 incentives that we've provided for electric vehicles. Another offering that we have that helps bolster EVs in our communities is the PowerShift pilot. And this is a pilot that we've recently launched in partnership with Efficiency Vermont. It launched in the fall of 2022. So customers who have an all-electric vehicle, either bought or leased, can get a $500 rebate for installing a level 2 charger, and they also get a free level 2 charger. Those chargers are scheduled to charge outside of peak hours, and we have enough funding for 40 customers here. And we also have additional funding for income eligible customers who need a service panel upgrade inside their home. I wanted to mention this because one of the reasons we wanted to conduct this pilot was to learn about getting data from EV chargers at the household level. What we were originally setting out to do was to figure out, can we shift load or can we encourage utility customers to shift their load to off-peak hours and not necessarily have to use a third-party aggregator. So third parties have been, I think, the primary way that, that we've explored shifting load in the past. Basically, this third party has agreements with charging manufacturers, and it's usually pretty limited to just a couple of those charging manufacturers. And then utilities can tap into the chargers and help, reduce the charging when it's during the peak periods. What we found with that model was that it was very expensive, and it never actually got to a point where we were able to save money, more than we were spending. So because of that payment structure, and because we were finding that it wasn't cost effective to run that type of program using a third party, we partnered up with Efficiency Vermont to learn, can we go directly to the manufacturer to get the data? And what we found is that it's very difficult and it's very expensive to get this type of data. A lot of the charging manufacturers that we were working with basically told us that they were not set up to provide individualized data, so customer level data, in a way that would be meaningful. So when they first presented this to us, we realized that the data that they were going to provide us wasn't going to be helpful. We couldn't necessarily even tell at first what the charging time was. And then on top of that, we found it to be very expensive. So we actually ended up opting out of receiving that individualized data because of the cost associated with it.
So you keep on saying very expensive, that's pretty scary to say that. It's very expensive. What's very expensive, Julia?
And I don't have the contract right in front of me, and we didn't end up even signing the contract because I think it was several $1,000s for a pilot to support 20 to 40 customers. So we found that that rather than getting the individualized customer data, we would take this learning from this pilot, understand that it's expensive and difficult to get the data that we need directly from the manufacturers. And we proceeded on with more high-level aggregate data because it served the needs of this particular pilot.
Yes, go ahead.
So Julia, this is very helpful and I appreciate this presentation. And I just want to bring it back to a previous point that what I think this committee is really struggling with is that it's very, very expensive to pave, plow, and paint our roads. And as we see more electric vehicles, we're needing to find a way to fairly assess and collect revenues from people charging at home. So as you start to look at these pilots, I hope that you also factor into it that I see down the pike, if this goes forward, if this path goes forward, we're going to need to work and regulate electric companies to track, measure, and assess differently how electric cars are using their power networks. That's so top of mind for this committee. Who knows if it will actually materialize, but that's where my mind currently is as you're presenting this data.
Yeah, absolutely understood that that's where you're coming from. And I will get to some of the considerations next and how we think you could move forward in a way that does not put significant cost pressures on utilities and the customers that they serve. So I just wanted to give a really high level overview of what are VEPS's broad legislative recommendations for 2023. And again, this is not necessarily like honed in on this specific topic. This is really, when we approach the 2023 legislative session, this is what's in the back of our mind. And I've highlighted those top two because those never change. Regardless of the year, we will always be committed to providing a safe and reliable electric grid and keeping electricity affordable for all consumers. And that's the piece that I want to focus in on, is the affordability piece as we talk about replacing the gas tax. So the next slide, considerations as you think about how to replace the gas tax. We feel strongly that a utility administered kilowatt hour fee would come with a high price tag. Like I mentioned, just from some of the initial exploratory work that we've done with charging manufacturers, we found that those prices could be high. And again, I don't have an exact price of how much it would cost. That's something that we would need to study. But just based on what we've had in our incidental findings from our other pilot related to load management, we've understood that there are challenges and hurdles to working directly with the manufacturer and to working with third-party aggregators. And that type of hardware or software technology would be necessary in addition to AMI. For all of the benefits that AMI brings, honing in on EV charging is not one of them. It's also worth noting that our member utilities, again, non-for-profit, community-owned utilities serving rural areas with lower income and high energy burden, these utilities currently have autonomy over their billing systems. That is not one of the centralized services that VEPSA provides. Each utility has its own billing system, and when an update needs to be made, each utility has to then pay for those updates. So each municipal utility in the VEPSA membership would need additional resources if a utility administered kilowatt hour fee would be the path that you all choose to move forward with. So we do have high concerns about, or we do have great concerns about those high fees because those can add cost pressure to electric rates. That type of increased pressure would put the cost burden on non-EV drivers within our community. And as you saw from that EV incentive slide earlier that listed out the number of incentives per each community, most of the utility customers in our communities are not EV drivers. So VEPSA member utility customers likely already facing a high energy burden. We are committed to keeping costs low for our member utilities and their customers. So we can't advocate for something that could increase cost pressure. Something else that we haven't really talked about.
Another question, I apologize to interrupt you. Do you collect monies now for anybody? Do any of your members now collect money, like a line item on your bill and send it to another organization? Does that happen at all?
Yes, so our members do collect money that goes to Efficiency Vermont. It's the EEC, the Energy Efficiency Charge. And we recently worked through an update to that system where the utilities were transferring data and sending the funding over to Efficiency Vermont. And Efficiency Vermont does assist with those costs and had worked through a process over several years to assist the utilities with making the billing updates that they need and to ensure a smooth transition of that data.
So if we could have that same model that you're using with Efficiency Vermont and offer to cover some of those costs in such a way, I mean, it could work, right? I mean, we could at least study this long enough to keep a conversation and dialogue going to see if we can't try to work this thing out a little bit, work together and maybe do some studies together and all of that. So the model that we're proposing isn't far-fetched, is it?
The model that we're considering with the utility administered kilowatt hour fee at this time, if all the costs were imposed on the utility, would be burdensome to the utilities and to their customers that they serve. I can't say for sure how much would be needed to alleviate those burdens. If that's a conversation that you'd want to continue having, I think we would be open to having that discussion. But at this point, if the entirety of the burden would be on the utility, it would be cost prohibitive at this point.
I don't think that would be the case. I think, we would put a burden, just a thought that we share some of it or pay some of it or something. But we're just looking at opportunities in the future, how we're going to handle this. We don't have the answers. That's why we have folks like you helping us out. because it's an interesting subject and it's going to take a lot of research and time and energy. And something that's not going to be resolved today or this year, but it's something that we're talking about for the future and to find the easiest way. And I'm sure others are going to struggle with the same question of how to substitute the gas tax. And so, like I said, nothing is definite. It's very helpful to hear from everyone to make sure that we get somewhere to go and talk, because like I said, it's going to be some time before anything is put in law, because we know the cost factor, we know the challenge, we know everything that's before us, but unless we start somewhere to discuss this issue, and it's good to hear the pros and the cons. Thank you.
Sure. Understood. And we can appreciate that this is a complex issue. Something that I haven't mentioned yet, but I think you're going to be hearing this also from other utilities who are going to be providing testimony today, is that the technology that would be required to track the load associated with EV charging, that can be easily bypassed. So what I mean by that is that if you're collecting information from a level 2 charger in someone's home, if a customer wants to not provide that data to their utility, all they have to do is use a less smart technology to charge their vehicle. That could just mean switching from a level 2 charger to a level 1 charger, which is basically just plugging it into your wall. And at that point, the utility would have no way of knowing what is actually consuming the electricity. This is, again, something that I think EV drivers would be attuned to if they know that they're paying an additional fee when they're charging with their level 2 charger. You are certainly going to have people who are knowledgeable of that and bypass the technology. And there's not really a whole lot that the utility can do to then determine, is the person charging with their level 2 or are they charging with a trickle charge? It's also worth noting that with EV rates that exist currently, it's usually an opt-in. So you're not necessarily capturing all of the household EV drivers. So something just I think that should be taken under consideration is that this is a concept of a kilowatt hour fee administered by utility could come with very high costs and a very easy way to see customers not necessarily paying their fair share. So all that to say that VEPSA supports a statewide mileage-based fee. We believe that could provide a more equitable solution to replacing revenue from the gas tax. And we have concerns that a utility administered kilowatt hour fee would impose high costs and potentially even create some cost shifting burdens on folks who are already experiencing high energy burden in their communities. And there's my contact info if you want to reach out further. And I'd be happy to follow up with anyone who has questions about AMI and its capabilities, because there are many.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julia.
Very good overview. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have.
Excuse me.
Yes, good morning.
Hi, good morning. Brought presentations and visual aids.
Senator Kitchell and Senator Perchlik, we've got a very complex device which she's going to speak about. I'm holding up to the camera.
Yeah, it looks very familiar to me.
You have one of these, Senator Kitchell?
I do, next door. Compliments of GMP.
So good morning. My name is Amber Widmer. I'm from Burlington Electric Department and I'm the regulatory specialist there.
Good morning. Thank you for coming. Appreciate it. Thanks.
I'm going to share.
Okay, we have sheets to follow. And have that on the screen in a second.
There's a lot of information in here, but I'm gonna fly through it so you can get
Well,
the
I'm
most
very
pressing
pleased that
questions.
so many utilities are working on the same issue, trying to get it resolved. Very surprised there's that much information out there at present, because it's a tough subject.
So we understand that you're exploring the best options for collecting replacement for the gas tax for EV owners. So we really appreciate the opportunity to share information with you about what our customers' EV chargers are capable of doing. in that
You
regard.
burn wood too.
We do burn wood. So you read my mind. So BED is the third largest utility in Vermont and the largest municipal utility. We have just over 21,000 customers with up to 6,000 of those turning over every year. So our customer care team stays very busy due to University of Vermont being in our territory.
Is 100% of the coverage is in Burlington? Is that, Green Mountain Power is not in Burlington?
Correct. The lines of our territory match the city of Burlington for the most part.
Okay, so you're in the heart of the Burlington area.
Yeah.
You go to South Burlington? No, just Burlington. Okay, I knew you centralized it. No,
I believe there may be some places where lines don't exactly
Yeah,
match up for
yeah.
the most part. It's
Okay, good to know.
1-to-1. So in addition to the high number of turnover with customers, we have a very high rate of renters. 60% of our residential customers are renters.
Wow.
And as you mentioned, yes, we are joint owners of the largest power producer in the state, the McNeil Generating Station. And we have been 100% renewable since 2014. We were lucky enough to go almost 12 years without a rate increase until the pandemic hit. This is something I'm not going to go through everything, but wanted you to have the information. This is a full list of all of our incentives that we provide customers to try to get them to switch from fossil fuel powered to electric powered vehicles, heating systems, and other appliances. In particular, I want to point out that we provide up to $2,300 or up to $3,000 for income qualified purchasers of new EVs. And for customers who buy EVs who are interested in installing a level 2 charger, we also provide up to $900 for the cost of purchasing and installing that charger.
So your competitor would be Vermont Gas, right? That
In the transportation sector, no.
no, I mean in customer overall.
For thermal applications,
Yeah.
yes, we're encouraging people to switch from natural gas heating to electric heat pumps
Okay.
where possible. So in exchange for giving customers those incentives for the level 2 charger, they're required to join our EV rate. And what comes as a benefit in addition to the $900 with joining the EV rate is you get half of your charging costs back as a bill credit every month. But those are the only customers we are able to see data for. And the only reason we can see that data is because they voluntarily choose to participate and allow us to see that data. So we're trying to get as many customers as we can sign up for this rate because it's how we're able to postpone infrastructure costs that would be necessary to serve peak loads to charge electric vehicles.
How do you see the data? I get that they volunteer and all that, but how does the data come to you?
Sure.
How do they participate?
So when they volunteer to just sign up for the rate, they're agreeing to, there's one charging company that they're allowed to use for the level 2 charger. That's ChargePoint currently. And that's because we have an agreement with ChargePoint that ChargePoint provide us with the data. And we pay them a fee for that.
Okay, so ChargePoint is recognizing, ChargePoint must have a dedicated charger on that car only. It's not going through a panel box or, I mean, it must be doing something, but.
It's a Wi-Fi connection.
Okay.
So that device, the consumer has to configure it to connect to their home internet connection. No?
I'll get to that.
Okay. We'll get you off topic. We apologize.
No problem. So the essential purpose of this EV rate is that if, say, everyone was to charge when they get home from work, everyone plugs in at the same time, that causes a peak load. Peak loads cost all of our customers increases in cost for supply because we have to, have that energy available. And then in the long run, it also increases cost for everyone because we'll have to update the capacity of our whole system to be able to serve that high of a load. So what the EV rate does is it helps the customers are giving us permission to tell them to charge not on those peak hours. So for instance, most of the customers who are on our EV rate right now are limited from charging until it's 10 p.m. until noon the next day. And then eventually, when we have more technology, we're going to be able to let people charge in anytime they want. And then if we do have a peak, we'll just send them a message that says, we're going to stop providing power to your charger right now. And for that benefit, they get the credit every month. If for any reason they charge during a peak, they're kicked out for the month, and then they can come back the next month. I've been forgetting to advance my slides.
So that's a really important point, because what we're exploring in part of this conversation is if we charged a premium for if an electric vehicle is charging at home, we would require some coordination, some intelligent devices to tell us that it's an electric car. And if there's a premium cost, like a tax to charge a car at home, there's going to be incentive to then do alternative paths where we won't manage these loads, which will actually increase the cost of their overall charge because we will have a higher peak, which is very expensive. So that's an important factor too, that if we do charge a premium, we might discourage people from managing their devices to better manage the overall electric load.
That is a critical point.
Yeah.
And I'm going to show you, I'm going to just skip over this. So we've implemented our EV rate starting in 2018. And even with the incentives that I mentioned, they get half their money back every month if they allow us to manage peak load, to avoid the peak load. We're only seeing, and there's some typos on here, so I'll correct it. The 162 customers are currently signed up for our EV rate, and that's as of February 2023. The number of total EVs in BEV based on 2021 DMV data is 583. So even with the incentives we're providing, we're only seeing a quarter of our EV owners signing up for this rate. So that means 3/4 of our EV owners would not be accessible for this for a per kilowatt fee. So the burden right there, you're starting out by putting it on 25% of the EV owners. On top of that, assuming that maybe everyone gets an EV someday, 60% of those are renters. Renters can't install a level 2 charger. If they don't have access to do that, they don't own the property, they're not going to make that investment. So right out of the gate, there's more people who would not be captured than would be by a per kilowatt hour fee. And this is just another graph showing, even with the incentives, we still, and this number could be even higher because we don't have the 22 DMV data yet. So to give you an idea of what the costs are for installing a level 2 charger, this is a really low end and really, like a reasonable high end. On Amazon.com, a charge point level 2 charger is $750. So with our $900, if you can find an electrician for $500, good luck. That would be great. And the year payback is figured against, and what we're seeing is an average $148 per year that people are getting back from the monthly charging credit. So this is going to be an even lower number if you have a plug-in hybrid, because you're going to be driving less and charging less. And the payback could be much longer if you're a customer who needs a panel upgrade or a service upgrade, because then you would have those additional electricians costs to add to that. So as you can see, the payback with the incentive ranges from 3 to 9 years, goes even longer without the incentive, and longer in those other cases I mentioned. I provided an example of a customer bill for somebody who's on the EV rate. I'm sorry, it's so small. But as you can see, we itemize all of our fees. On the right, we define what those fees are. And it's the bottom line. There's a negative $13.05. That's our EV charging credit. So if there were a kilowatt hour fee, as I mentioned, we're seeing an average of $148 per year. I understand from the Agency of Transportation, the fee you need to collect about $150 a year to balance out what they're paying, not paying in a gas tax. So right there, you'd absorb any benefit.
Yes.
So right now we're giving a discount when people charge at home, and we're talking about possibly increasing the fee. There could be in a different world where regulations come in, where we mandated through the coordination, not just Vermont, but the whole state, that cars plugging into our electrical network at homes have to be managed and smart and intelligent enough for you to manage peak loads without giving the discount or so on. But we just would require that cars plugged into any residential node on an electrical network have to be intelligently manageable for peak management. Then we can maybe stop talking about the discounts for it, but also improve the overall quality of the network. Am I making sense of what I'm describing? So if it was required that cars had to be manageable on our electrical network when plugged in at home. There are other side benefits that could be compensated.
So I think that's a very good point, Senator Chitna, because as we are gonna get more cars on this system, I mean, the whole part that we're talking about is an infrastructure management. I mean, we talk about infrastructure upgrades, but until we can get those upgrades, there's gonna have to be some coordination with management to be able to make sure that we can supply that load.
I'm glad you asked that question. So that would be great if we could require all TVs to join a load management program. The current state of technology is that customers have a choice. It's not like a gas station where you have to get gas from a pump. This is a level 1 charger. So the reason I brought it in today was to show, like Julia mentioned, it's very not smart. All you need is a 120 volt outlet, plug it in. It doesn't show up to the utility as anything. There's no Wi-Fi, there's no meter. You could plug it in anyone's house.
That's the slowest possible
That's the
charge.
slowest one. So for instance, I have a Subaru Solterra, and they estimate it would take 24 hours to charge about 220 miles. So it's about 10 miles an hour. But if you have a commute that's maybe 30 miles an hour overnight, this is perfectly sufficient.
We recognize we're gonna get some leakage. We recognize that, we really do, but I think the convenience, people are very, very much instant gratification about everything that they do. And about the first time that they run out because they didn't have the 24 hours to plug their car in, they might decide that they wanna do take different avenues. So we recognize that, when we do. And again, I just don't believe that there's enough people out there that are greedy enough to not want to be, they don't want to get stuck beside the road for one, and the other is that time is everything to them.
That's an excellent point. I'm glad you brought it up. Yeah, so for people who are persuaded to install a level 2 charger because they just want the convenience and the speed, and they don't mind being, kicked out of those hours, that's one thing. But we are also seeing, based on our numbers, not all of those 72% of people are people using level 1s. They have level 2 chargers. They're just opting not to allow us permission to see that data. So even if, your assumption is correct and people don't want to wait, that doesn't mean you're going to have access to the data. So again, I'm just kind of summarizing some of the things I've already talked about. The high cost that we're seeing for level 2 installation is weighing against people opting to join our rate. The ease of level 1, even if you're on the rate, you can still bypass a fee just by plugging this in. As I mentioned, the high number of renters right off the bat, 2/3 of the people you're not going to capture. Yeah, like I mentioned, some people may not want to be limited in what time of the day they could charge. They could, like you said, have a level 2 charger, but still not opt to join the rate. And then wouldn't see that data. And as I mentioned, if you were able to collect the fee from each EV owner right now, that would cancel out the discount, taking away even one more incentive. The fact that you're only going to capture 1/4 of those people means, I don't know how, but you would have to essentially charge each person who's opted into this program 4 times to capture every EV owner. So obviously our recommendation is to pursue the administration's recommended proposal. You'll capture every EV owner. They'll all be paying their fair share. It won't have the negative effect of, as you mentioned, incentivizing people to get off of the rate, which we need people beyond to help manage costs for everybody.
I want to make clear on that too. The administration's position was to do this first. Absolutely positively. This is what they wished to do first. But after they were told that it wasn't possible, they went to the mileage idea because they recognized that we're going to have to get there at some point in time. So their first choice is this. So yeah, to do electricity as far as where that is. So so that's kind of why we are pursuing this further, like where we're at. So
well, I see that the PSC is going to be coming in later to talk to you. I understand they did 2 studies already. So I recommend asking them what they found in those studies. And again, to reiterate, the ability to meet our climate requirements depends on electrification. Obviously, you all know, as you discussed, electrification of transportation is coming. The EV rate is the method that we have to offset costs for everyone while we accommodate that, while still providing reliable service to everybody. So we asked not to have additional burdens that keep us from incentivizing people to do that, because that's the method that we need to be able to meet our climate goals. Happy to answer any questions.
Yes.
So I see the point why many states have been navigating towards this, and you've articulated it well. But, I'm still intrigued to know from an industry perspective how much this is beyond what Vermont can mandate. But it feels like as we look to an increasing energy load, as we electrify our transportation sectors, I hope that at a national level that we are mandating these cars to be more intelligently managed for peak load optimization. But that's a broader conversation beyond the scope of what we're going to cover about Burlington Electric.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it comes down to the technology that's available. And I mean, I don't know how you would require people to stop using a level 1 charger, but it's a good question.
Okay, thank you very much for coming.
Very much.
Appreciate it. Okay, committee, we'll take a 5-minute break here, 10 minutes.